Of the minutes, you want to make a motion to approve any changes? I didn't see anything in there that,
Yeah, I'll make a motion. I make a motion to approve the Board of Health minutes for October 4th, 2012, and just to make that change that on this draft from September 24th to October 4th.
yep, seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. With that done, we waited 10 minutes, so I think we're pretty good. We'll get started. So Scituate wind turbine discussion continued. I think first on the list, Attorney Tanya Trevisan. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Just as a procedural matter, I had, for the record, I had sent a letter via email dated today to Jennifer Sullivan to be distributed to the board members in time for tonight's hearing. So the letter and the attached materials, I understand you didn't get, but I did provide you copies with this evening, and I'd like them included in the record of tonight's meeting as well.
Sure, I'll just make sure I get a copy of that.
Right, yeah, you're welcome to keep the two, like I said, okay. There are three main arguments that I wanted to bring to your attention tonight, in addition to that which I presented at the last Board of Health meeting. First of all, the operation of the wind turbine continues to constitute a nuisance and is dangerous to the McKeever's health. There are 4 exhibits that I reference in that letter dated today that I request that the Board of Health review this evening. The first, indicated as Exhibit A, is a number of emails and records that the McKeevers have submitted to the Board of Health since November 14th of this year, which document how the wind turbine is continuing to affect them on a daily basis, including sleep disturbances, headaches, extreme fatigue, nausea, dizziness, ear pressure and pain, anxiety, and difficulty concentrating at work and school. Since the last Board of Health meeting, McKeever's children had gotten reports from their teachers, and one of their children in particular had a significant drop in grades. Shadow flicker continues for up to 3 hours every day that the sun is out in the afternoon, which forces the McKeevers to leave their home to escape the dizziness that's caused by the strobe light shadow flicker caused by the wind turbine. The Board of Health itself has relied on the Mass DEP report from January 2012 throughout this process. Be reminded that the report states that there is, quote, evidence of an association between annoyance from prolonged shadow flicker exceeding 30 minutes per day and potential transitory cognitive and physical health effects. Shadow flicker is a form of air pollution as defined by 310 CMR 7.0. This prolonged exposure to the shadow flicker demonstrates that the operation of the wind turbine is at the very least a nuisance and directly interferes with the McKeever's right to the quiet use and enjoyment of the property. For these reasons, we ask that the Board of Health order that the wind turbine be shut down intermittently during those periods of shadow flicker so that McKeevers aren't forced to leave their property every time the sun is shining in the afternoon. The second piece of evidence that we're offering to the board tonight is a letter from Mr. McKeever's physician dated November 12th of 2012, which attests to the fact that Mr. McKeever has experienced anxiety, insomnia, and vertigo since the installation of the wind turbine. I provided a copy for the board to review in camera, but I would request that that be provided back to council at the conclusion of the meeting in order to protect my client's privacy. In continuing, of great concern to McKeevers is the third piece of additional evidence we're offering tonight. It has recently come to light that the Board of Health had been aware of the public health concerns, including noise and shadow flicker relating to the wind turbine before it went online. Specifically, a review of certain public records reveals an email dated January 9th of 2012 from the Director of Public Health stating, quote, "The Board of Health didn't get involved with the permitting or regulating of the wind turbine because it isn't near a lot of houses. The one it is near cut a deal with them. The two major issues are the noise frequency and flicker," end quote. A copy of this email is included in the materials attached to the letter as Exhibit C. As counsel to the McKeevers, I'm curious to know of whom the Director of Public Health refers when she states, quote, "The one it's near cut a deal with them."
I don't want to interrupt you, but isn't, from reading your letter, that this is the Duxbury Board of Health we're talking about here, isn't it?
It's a response from Ms. Sullivan to an inquiry from the Duxbury Board of Health.
From the Duxbury Board of Health.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Further, it's of great concern that the Board of Health justifies its failure to act because the wind turbine isn't near a lot of houses. Be it one household or 100, the Board of Health is not absolved from its statutory duty to remove or prevent any nuisance or cause of sickness in the town. In conclusion, on behalf of the McKeevers and in the interest of the public health, we respectfully request the following. 1, that the Board of Health schedule a site visit to the property to experience firsthand the conditions created by the wind turbine that the McKeevers endure on a daily basis. 2nd, that the Board of Health reconsider its motion to order Scituate Wind to cease and desist operations relating to the wind turbine at night. And 3rd, that the Board of Health orders Scituate Wind to cease and desist operations of the wind turbine at all times during which the McKeevers are affected by the shadow flicker produced by the wind turbine. Thank you for your time.
Well, in response to that, I mean, if there's a motion made, there's a motion made, but I have taken rides out to certain properties and at some point, I would come to visit the McKeever family. That wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, I would have no problem with that. I actually walk along the bike path at the Go Green landscaping area. Sometimes, some weeks, several times, but I've been there dozens of times. I'm also out on the Spit on many occasions, but I would certainly follow the site visit.
Okay. No, probably.
I gotta say, just for the record, same thing here. I live on First Cliff. I walk down there all the time. When this issue came up, I don't want to tell you how many times I've driven and walked around the neighborhood, stood in the McKeever driveway and at the Green Connection to listen and observe what's going on there as well. But I also, if you want to set up a particular time where we stand in the house, I'm happy to do so as well.
Great, thank you.
Okay. And I'm not going to renew the motion I made the last time. Nothing really, most of what I've read your letter and a lot of it is what was previously presented. So I think we just need to move forward with the plan.
So at the last meeting, we started to set up a steering committee. We had some stuff come in, so I think we do have a letter. I don't know. Do you have the letter here? Do I have it? Do you have it? For,
What letter is that?
for building inspector, Mr. Dowd.
No, I have that.
Well, at the last meeting, Frank touched upon,
Sorry.
and I think it was initiated by us reviewing the requirements under the special permit. And we did have some discussions regarding section 10, and that was provided by, Attorney Trevisan in her packet last meeting. And I think we should go back to, that. I think we should revisit discussing the section 10 requirement on that was granted with the special permit.
What do you want to discuss? I have
Well,
discussed it, so you know.
well,
Let me just tell you this. I discussed it with Mr. Duggan, I think, the next day, or a couple of days after. My view of the permit is that it does give the building inspector jurisdiction over that paragraph 10. But the Board of Health, I think, has also the same jurisdiction, probably greater power than the building inspector does with respect to a wind study. So my own view is that hopefully the town wouldn't do this twice, that the building department wouldn't conduct a wind study and then the Board of Health would do it. Hopefully we can do it in conjunction, but I think we've started the process. And I think it's really at this point, it's up to the Board of Health to decide whether there's a noise violation of the permit.
Well, I believe there's certainly a reasonable basis to allege that there is a violation.
If there's an existing violation?
No, and I'm really just paraphrasing, or I believe that I think the stories that have been told present a scenario where there is a reasonable basis to allege that there are violations, so therefore I think these noise standards should be,
That a study should be done.
that a study should be required, yes.
Okay.
Well, that's where we're at, and in here with the planning board, there's a mechanism for the funding to be, for the study from Scituate Wind LLC, and it's through the building inspector, so the Board of Health is requesting the building inspector to go forward, that way we're covering our way to get the study done.
Yeah,
And there's a letter here drafted, and I'd like the two board members, I have read the letter, I don't know, Frank, if you read the letter or if you've seen the letter.
No, I have not.
And this puts us on track. For the next step is, I'm hoping with the steering committee that they've gotten together or will get together to help procure somebody to do the study. And that's acceptable. It may not be entirely acceptable by the three parties, but something that's on common ground that everybody's worked together with hiring. That there are certain standards we're looking for through Mass Board of Health, Mass DEP. But it's good that you guys are working together for it, so that's the idea, yes.
And so just on that point, Mr. Clark, so where we are from the community's perspective is that, of course, we had the agreement or the directive from the Board of Health to move forward with the steering committee. Mr. Dean was kind enough to put forward Tech Environmental as one particular candidate that might be worthy of consideration. And of course, you know, we as a community group are working on this on a volunteer basis to identify another appropriate candidate who we believe will be able to present a scope of work from them for this particular matter within the next couple of weeks. We were hoping to actually have that in hand last week, and unfortunately, while I was traveling, I received an email late last week that the company wasn't going to be able to get a proposal to us until the second week of December. So in terms of any progress that the steering committee may or may not have been able to make at one point in time, it largely falls on our shoulders for the delay, so I'll be the first one to admit that.
But it's working, it's forward progress, and that's what's
Well,
important.
And the only other thing I want to point out is that, you know, we're all, as residents, trying to work with the town and the Board of Health. We're doing this after hours and so on in between meetings at work. So that's the reason for the delay. But the undertaking that we do have from this other company is that they should have a proposal for us that we'll review and circulate to all the members of the steering committee, hopefully by the second week of December.
Oh, great.
And then at that point in time, I think we could probably have a meeting of that steering committee. If there was only one other point, and I think Mr. Vaza was looking into this, and we don't know, we're not in this realm. So it was brought forward that that steering committee may be subject to something called the Massachusetts Open Meeting Law. And I believe Mr. Vaza was looking into whether that, in fact, that was or was not the case. And I don't, again, so we need some direction from you.
Sure.
Sure, you can answer that if you got an answer.
Yeah, I do actually. So, I initiated a potential meeting with Mr. Dean, Mr. Thompson, and myself. How do they want to proceed? Do we want to do emails and email proposals? and then we can banter some back and forth and then meet in person. As Mr. Thompson said, he thought they were gonna have a proposal by the close of business on Wednesday, November 28th. That Wednesday passed, which was last Wednesday. Then on Friday at 4:30, which I didn't get until a little bit after that, Mr. Thompson raised the issue of, does the steering committee have to adhere to the open meeting laws? So I tried to get a hold of the Attorney General's office on Friday afternoon to no avail, but I did call them first thing this morning, and subsequently did hear back from them. And although there is a little bit of gray area, their overall response was that the subcommittee should adhere to the open meeting law. There's some question whether it's a multi-member board, even though we don't have a quorum on it, there's only one person, and then they brought up even just at face value, if one party believes it's not open, then maybe you should open it, even if only one. So as of, the response that I received today from the Attorney General's office, I believe that the subcommittee does have to adhere to an open meeting.
Then you're gonna have to give notice.
We should notice.
All that.
I'm surprised by that, I really am.
Yeah, to be honest with you, until it was raised.
Because I pulled in my mind,
It wasn't even something that was on my radar screen, frankly.
well, that's why we only have one member from this board there, because if the three of us get together without, that's breaking open meeting law, point blank.
Yeah.
But you guys are just good citizens that we're trying to get together so we get three, I'm repeating myself, but to get the three interested parties together to work together. And then come to the board with something that we know everybody's seen and can work with.
My concern is this, Chairman, is that this is going to be a contentious issue, and we are an independent board, and I know my main concern is the health and safety and welfare of the residents of Scituate, and I believe the study should have been done yesterday, and my concern is that the two parties will be very far apart in the scope and of what they're looking for. And when somebody's gonna have an issue with whoever does the study, and just like a real estate appraisal where the professional engineer says, I have no interest in them. My brother-in-law doesn't live on Third Cliff, nor do I am I a shareholder of that Scituate Wind. At some point, the engineer is going to be independent. They have a license to uphold, just like our Title V engineers present themselves that say this is in fact the design that the perks that were recorded. This is the design that's going to work. So my concern is that the parties are going to be very far apart.
Well, that's where the board's gonna bring it together, and they have to make a decision if they are, and that's.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman,
But it'll be
I think it's probably somewhat presumptuous to assume that the parties are going to be far apart until such time as we are given the opportunity to submit a proposed scope of
Yeah.
work, and I haven't even seen it.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not an acoustical engineer, I don't specialize in this area, so we may very well find that the parties, frankly, aren't as far apart as perhaps people might think. So I think that, as the folks that are the most impacted by this situation on a day-to-day basis, and as somebody that would agree that we would be at the table, and as a group that's doing this, in between all of our other day-to-day activities, support mails and so on, I think it's probably reasonable for us to be given until the second.
Oh, I got no problem with it.
And all I'm asking is, let's not anybody assume that, there's gonna be a gap. There may very well be a big gap.
Well, Jennifer, I wish she was here, because she's got a list of, I hope, acoustical engineers that are approved by Mass Department of Public Health. And that's a pool you guys can draw from as well, and that's what I'm looking at. That, you know,
Yeah,
you're looking
and
at
we
3 or
look
4
forward
of
to
them.
Jennifer's back in the chair having a conversation with her.
Yeah.
But first, what we want to do is get the scope,
Yep,
then we can also discuss who the best candidates are.
When do you think you're gonna get here?
I was not given a date. I was told, and I shared this with the steering committee, the second week of December. So I'm assuming,
So that's
let's
next week.
consider that this is the first week, so that would be next week.
And so then the committee would meet after that, presumably sometime.
Yeah, I think in
Hopefully
fairness
before
to everybody, I think, yeah, oh, no, absolutely. I think in fairness, you know, we'll obviously, as soon as we receive it, we'll circulate it to everybody so that if people have an opportunity to review it in advance.
Yep.
And then we'll set aside the appropriate date for everybody to meet together in this public forum and work through it.
The next Board of Health meeting I see here is January 7th.
Well, I think it would be, from my view, it would be appropriate for us if we can to have the steering committee meet before Christmas, if that's at all possible.
That's what I'm hoping, so that we,
Yeah.
there might be a chance of giving us a presentation
Yeah.
by the 7th.
And I'm gonna be following up with the company that we've been speaking to, who's doing this for us pro bono, by the way, on Friday of this week to see how things are going.
Can I just have the board discuss how they envision the steering committee putting together a proposal to present to the board? Is the steering committee gonna present, would you like the steering committee to present one proposal to the board?
I think,
Or a ser, I mean,
well, I think there's
and-
two
and-
things from my point of view. One is the scope of work. And then second is people who might want to bid on the scope of work. Okay? There's got to be agreement on the scope of work, first of all. You know, and you know, where do we do the monitoring from, for example? I suspect it's going to be an important factor. How many different places do we monitor? How long do we do it? That type of thing. So I think that you need to do that, and then hopefully, once there's some agreement or close to agreement on the scope of work, and if there is no agreement on the scope of work, we might, that might have to come to the Board of Health to look at. I would hope not, or, you know, maybe 2 proposed scopes of work at least, and we can start getting some feedback from some of the engineering companies who might be willing to do it. I'm not, from my point of view, I'm not sure we're going to be saying by January 7th, we want bids. But I would hope that we would have a scope of work and maybe a certain, 3 or 4 identified companies who are qualified and that both parties would agree might be suitable, and probably 2 or 3 companies.
The way
One
I-
side or the other says.
The way I envision this is scope of work, let's agree on a time frame for releasing an RFP, deadline to respond. Shouldn't be, within a couple of weeks, I would think those companies identified as reasonable candidates should be able to respond. And I would certainly think, based on a Board of Health meeting January the 7th, I see no reason why this study be undertaken and underway, certainly by the end of January, I would think.
I'm on board with you. I think that's the time of the year you're supposed to do it too, in the coldest weather.
I'm not an expert in this area, but I'm
I
sure.
think from what Mr. Dottie has presented and stuff I've read, that seems to be,
Yeah, so,
Yeah, so
so
it'll
the
work
timing for all of this may work out very, very well. So-
that's what I'm.
But I just,
Yeah.
the reason I just want to bring this forward is just to want to acknowledge that, from a timing perspective, it's the community group that has slowed the process down for the reasons that I've mentioned. But we're dealing in good faith and we're trying to get this thing in hand by next week and that is the undertaking provided to you.
Just to clarify Mr. Thompson's remarks, we are not acoustical engineers. As a matter of fact, before Scituate wind turbine went up, I didn't even know that that was a science that had been practiced. So we're playing catch-up. We're not a wind turbine financier, we're not a wind turbine construction company. And we've got a lot of learning to do. And that's slowed us down, and I'd like to extend my apology to the board of us slowing down the process.
Slow fast, we want to move on too, we don't want to feel like we're doing anything wrong, so hold on and still.
And more again, I want to iron out the logistics, because once again, we can't talk outside this open meeting.
Right.
And so, I guess 2 things. You just threw out 3, off the cuff, 3 questions. Are you able to submit those to Jennifer that then get submitted to me, that gets submitted to the steering committee? Like your thoughts or your question?
I mean, I think that yes, that I can advise Jennifer of my concerns, and to the extent that she accepts them, she's on the committee. So that was one of the reasons we put it in.
Right, right, yeah.
I'd just like to introduce myself for people who don't know me. I'm Neil Duggan, the Town Scituate Building Inspector, and as the board is mentioning, within the special permit conditions which the building inspector enforces, there is a condition that if evidence is presented to me, that I can order the acoustical test. I am not an acoustical expert. However, in my 18 years, we have very often with the zoning board of appeals, and very familiar with the process, hired consulting engineers. And I agree with Mr. Lynch. You know, the scope of work is the most important. Then an RFP, and you know, as I see it, whether I take the lead or the Board of Health takes the lead, and I've got plenty on my plate, people see me doing a great job. Transparency is the most important thing here, and I think that this is what I'm hearing here, and you know, we need to get the right engineer who's going to perform the scope of work, and he needs to be somebody who is not attached to either side. And that's just the way I see it. So, and I'm willing to work along with you. I don't think we should be duplicating efforts here, because and one question I have, the Board of Health has jurisdiction to order a noise study, is that correct?
I think it's more with the funding. It comes through the planning board that we go through the building inspector to
Right.
ask Scituate Wind LLC.
But the funding, that's one item the planning board didn't, you know, there is no funding on the town side for it. So where's the funding coming from?
Scituate Wind LLC, if there's complaints,
Okay.
yeah.
And is there a set figure, or?
It's gotta be something that's worked out and in agreement. So I think you mentioned, you know, I wanna go on a witch hunt, I think, to use your words, but we've gotta do it in a way that it's done properly. So, you know, we can't do 100 tests at everybody that's complained. You've gotta pick the worst ones and say, this is where it's really bad,
So
worst
just-
case scenario.
All right.
Just on that particular point, two things. You know, that the approach that we have discussed with our company that we're dealing with is one that's practical and reasonable.
Right.
And you'll be happy to know Mr. Lynch touches on a few of the points, plus a few others that you've already brought up in terms of the key points. So, you know, there shouldn't be any surprises, but we're gonna ask for something that's practical but also reasonable, and is appropriately done.
I think I see it when it all gets on the table with the steering committee, so. Ms. Duggan, are you finished? I'm sorry to cut off.
I'm all set.
All right, good, thank you.
Yes, I'm Albert Vanguard. I'm the Director of Public Works and a citizen of the city here, of the town. I've been involved in the project not since 2005 when it started, but around 2008 or 9 when the Renewable Energy Committee turned it over then to the town, and as a member of the town, it's DPW, and my job was to work through the RFP process to select a turbine developer, carry everything through the contracting. So I'm really quite well versed in the contracting, legal, special permit side of it. And the concern I have for the town is that we do things in accordance with, precisely in accordance with the various bylaws that are put in place, so that we don't end up in a situation which I'm not led to believe that this will be Scituate Wind's eventual position, but we want to be in a position where everything we do is on the sound ground, such that they don't have a cause to in the future then come back after the town because the town has violated some of the agreements that is established with it. Now, in the special permit, which was issued on April 10th of 2010, condition 10, which you've all been referring to, laid out a specific basis on which a noise study would be triggered, and that would be if there's complaints alleged and reasonable understanding by the building inspector that there may be a need to do a post-construction noise study. There's a process for doing that that's been laid out, and specifically that refers to the Scituate zoning bylaws. The Scituate zoning bylaw then refers specifically to this state's 310 CMR, which then lays out exactly what are the limits that a turbine must be within. In addition, the DEP has issued the protocol for how you do that noise analysis. So I don't think we really want to go off we're taking great risk if we go out and invent something beyond what is laid out in the rule of law, permit, bylaw, reference to state law, and then the state agency responsible for this laying out exactly what the protocol is for doing it. So if we vary very far from this, then we put ourselves on a legal limb that if in the end Scituate Wind doesn't like it, and we went ahead anyway and did something that they considered adverse to the contracts they signed, the town would be not in a good position legally. And none of us want to get tied up in the legal fees. So I just wanted to lay that out as those are kind of the steps that get us to what is probably an established protocol. And in fact, the state's even identified several engineering firms who have their stamp on the line when they do a study as to a choice. So I think the process could move along fairly quickly if we don't get real inventive.
Correct, I agree with you. That thing from Mass Department of Public Health, has that been presented at the steering committee? Have you seen that
No,
letter with the list or anything? Has Jennifer brought that to the meeting?
No, we haven't met.
You haven't met that? Okay.
We were, once again, there was a question on Friday afternoon whether we should adhere to open meeting.
Yeah.
And as of today, people still didn't know whether we should meet or not. And at some point, I sent an email that said we should not meet and we should discuss it tonight.
I'll leave a note with Jennifer, because you guys should have that letter, I think, and it might be a very good guideline to work from. And like I said, I knew there was something there that has a list of
And that's
companies
something that
that...
could be provided electronically, Mr. Clark?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have all of the emails.
It's a letter that he sent out to you.
I believe so, yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Well, does the board want to,
Thank you, Ms. Banks.
does the
Good.
board want
Thank you.
the, checking this one right here? You know,
Yes.
how to test and how many sites should be tested, how to find contractors, but they don't list contractors.
I think Jennifer's got something that's, yeah. We'll check with her when she gets back. Okay, in the back.
Yeah,
Sir.
so
You've been
Alex
very
Albert,
patient, thank you.
53 Collier Road.
Yeah.
So the one thing I'm a little bit worried about, going back to, take you back a while in the conversation, but
Sure.
it just got mentioned again. The study was kind of equated to a Title V study, and it seems to me that the science and the knowledge that the average guy who's got his, credentials for doing Title V studies is much more settled. It's done every day, it's done a lot, and my concern here is that as part of this wind study, and in particular because there's talk of kind of limiting it to something that's got like 5 steps of legal stuff, which always makes me worried that the end result of making sure people are not being negatively impacted is not the priority. And again, if the town needs to spend some money to fix a problem it caused, I think that that's something that the board needs to raise its hand and say there's a real problem first and not worry about the potential money impact first.
Understood. I think the faith in the acoustical engineer is to measure the decibels, and it's either gonna
But
be
how
over
is
10
that-
decibels or under 10 decibels. In the scope of work that's gonna have to be discussed to how that's done, that's the trust issue, that's the transparency
Right.
that we wanna make sure everybody, like I said, you may not 100% agree, but at least you know where this person's coming from, where that person's coming
I just wanna
from,
make
and why
sure
we
it gets-
came up with the end result of how that testing's done.
I just want to make sure you guys think it through carefully and don't just follow the...
Oh, no, absolutely, but like I said, I don't know acoustical engineering either, so you have to have faith in that stamp the man's got, or the format, whatever, but you gotta have faith in the engineer, so that's what I'm looking at. Yes,
Tanya Trebison with the McKeevers again. With all due respect to Mr. Duggan and Mr. Banger, it's of great concern that the Board of Health needs to remember that they are autonomous from these other town entities and not to be persuaded one way or another by any of them, including selectman, administrator, building inspector, anything, because you by statute have your own separate autonomous authority to decide these things. And
Correct, and
I
I-
just want to make sure that that's clear.
absolutely, crystal clear, and I think their guidance there is just that we don't step off a path, that we have a path set, we know where we're going, and you just don't wanna trip up on it, that's all. That's all. And I think think that advice isn't saying one way or the other. I think they're open-minded as well from what I heard. It's just,
And I appreciate,
protocol to
I
follow.
appreciate your comment, because one of the issues here, just so you, little inside info, very often the building inspector is put in charge of other jurisdictions. And, you know, this is kind of a case like that, where I'm being told to look at something in the light of 310 CMR, which is Board of Health. That's their CMR, that's not my CMR. I'm very capable of doing it. And I think what I was saying to the board is I'm happy to work with them. And my most important thing for me is that it be transparent, and be thorough, be done right.
yes.
Gordon Yee for Scituate Wind. I just want to clarify something Mr. Thompson said, and that is when we submitted the tech environmental study to the committee, same tech environmental study that we had given a copy of the board, just so you know what was presented as a starting point for discussion. It wasn't presented as this is a study that we're proposing that you do. It was started.
That's exactly the way I took it. You gotta
Yes.
start somewhere,
Yeah,
and I did.
I agree with
Yeah.
Mr. Dean, that's exactly what
No.
how my comments were intended to be.
Interpreted.
I wasn't planning to give them the dueling proposals. I thought the best if we sit down, talk about what's out there. You do have a letter from the DEP about how they're doing studies in Fairhaven. So you put those on the table, you can start working on it. If the community group wants to wait till they get their consultant's proposal or thoughts, that's fine. I just know that there's been a lot of urgency expressed by the residents, and we were trying to move things along.
No, and you did, and that's great, and let's continue it on. I think that's perfect. I do, and that's, yeah. Okay. The letter, I had the letter on the table. You guys read it? Like you had it last.
I'm not sure. It says Mr. Duggan can. I'm not sure we need to sign it. I think given the discussion that we've had today.
You're going to accept on some of it.
I mean, it's, the Board of Health is leading this parade, I think.
I'm just looking at what was
Yeah.
written in the paperwork, and it's just a
I
piece of paper
understand.
on the file. It's a paper trail. That's the way I'm looking at it.
What is this letter that you're referring
I can read it out loud.
Fine with me.
All right, this is addressed to Mr. Neil Duggan, Building Commissioner, 600 Chief Justice Cushing Highway, Scituate, Mass. December 3rd, 2012. Dear Mr. Duggan, the Scituate Board of Health is in receipt of several complaints about noise generated by the wind turbine by different residents of our town. Further, these complaints claim that adverse health conditions are resulting from this noise. In accordance with the Scituate Planning Board special permit for the wind turbine dated April 10th, 2012, we request that you enforce Condition 10 by ordering Scituate Wind LLC to conduct an acoustical study by contractors that Mass DEP has recommended, and that the protocol be acceptable to the Scituate Board of Health as well as the Mass DEP. We request this to be commenced as soon as possible, as the winter season is the optimal testing time. Thank you for your assistance in this matter. Please let us know if you have any questions. Very truly yours, Scituate Board of Health.
to?
Yes, a question. Does the Board of Health have a list of contractors that it's received from the DEP?
I think Jennifer had a handful of them, yes. Mr. Bang had mentioned that as well. You probably have the letter as well, so, yeah. And we just mentioned that Ms. Montanari would send that electronically along when Jennifer gets back in. Ms. Montanari, and she'll pass along, so. Yes.
Paul McSorley, 37 Leslie. The open meeting requirements, somewhat familiar with them, but can you, I mean, will this steering committee, will it be an open meeting? I understand the posting, number of days in advance has to be posted, but will this three-person steering committee?
Actually, 6 people, I think.
Yeah, I think she's, good question. We have to post it, then it has to be open to the public. I guess the question is, can the public have input?
I think you gotta look at the open meeting law. I think you can, since the committee is not charged with making and this is an off-the-cuff legal opinion, I shouldn't give that, but if they're not charged with conducting a hearing, as the Board of Health often is under various provisions of state law and regulatory law. I think it can be one of those meetings that people get to listen, but that they aren't necessarily entitled to participate in. I think the intention was that participation would be from the certain people that the board appointed. Now, if the committee wants input from people who are interested enough to show up, I would encourage the subcommittee to give them some time. But you also don't want it to be something that gets in the way of your work process and getting something done. So,
Another more logistical question. Mr. Kelly and Mr. Thompson represent the concerned citizens, and we have a representative from Keepers, I'm sorry. And are they in unison, or why aren't they part of the steering committee? I mean,
you can only have so many people on.
but what if they don't like what's coming, what's come on, what?
Nothing is going to be, the committee, I think we talked about this the last time, the committee can make a recommendation to the Board of Health. The Board of Health is going to have a hearing at which everybody, I'm sure, will be here to offer their opinion as to what the Board of Health should do about the recommendations of the committee. And then the Board of Health ultimately has to make a decision as to how to go forward.
2 comments. My name is Jerry Kelly. Mr. Lynch, your comments earlier about the role of the committee, I believe that the role of the committee is that of a recommendation, not a decision. That distinguishes us from the Board of Health.
Right.
And Mr. Baza, we are endeavoring to represent all of the members of our impacted community. We are in conversations with Tanya just about every day, maybe not all the days on the weekend. So yes, we're endeavoring to represent the full impacted community. So that you're not going to have multiple disparate groups.
Well, you get my point. I don't want, if we're going to narrow it down, let's narrow it down. Are you in agreement with that?
We're comfortable with that.
Okay. And I did just want to verify, so it's you two, Mr. Dean, and and Jennifer and myself.
Right.
And, okay.
I see no hands. There's one other question I wanted to raise to follow up on. Since there's been no committee meeting, we did not, I think, decide whether the subcommittee was going to look at things besides noise. And go ahead, Mr. Thompson.
We are looking at both the noise and shadow flickers as part of the scope of work that we're going to be presenting.
And Mr. Dean, is that something that your company is going to at least participate in at the subcommittee level and observe, I would suspect, as to whether you want to participate in any activities relating to flicker and shadow?
We'll certainly participate in the discussions, yes.
Okay. We'll see where we are after we get a recommendation.
So when the study is being done, there's going to be a hearing before you guys move forward?
Correct.
When we get the results of the study back,
We're going to have a meeting definitely on the 7th, at which we hope to get some input from the subcommittee, as I understand it. In the best of all worlds, everything will be all ready to go for us, but I don't think that's probably going to happen by the 7th, just given the holidays and the schedules. The next meeting after that, we meet every 2 weeks generally, so that's going to be the 21st, which I know is probably on Martin Luther King Day. So we won't be meeting that day, but normally it's the following Wednesday.
I'm hopeful that the process will be of this subcommittee. The production of a scope or scopes of work, if we can't reach an agreement. The identification of a listing of qualified acoustic engineers. And then ultimately, cost and who bears it. But at this point, we're really focused upon scope of work.
Okay, absolutely.
In this condition, when I get a letter like that, I will typically get respond to it within a week, and I generally will give some time parameters give some instructions as to when we expect to have this thing done, or so. In the interest of what is reasonable, while sitting here, what is a reasonable time, right? Because I'm gonna say 30 days, 60 days.
Reasonable time for, you lost me for 1 second.
Well, reasonable time, let's take, today's December 3rd, we're already out to January 3rd anyways. I'm thinking by mid-February. I mean, does that seem in the realm? We kind of said the 7th, you guys are gonna have information, we meet in 2 weeks, that puts us in,
If everything moves along at a reasonable pace, and we can garner agreement on this thing as reasonable individuals, to have this study, awarded to somebody and their work done by the middle of February, seems to me
yeah.
to be reasonable.
I've just got some information. The study itself takes 6 months. All right, so.
Yeah.
I was not aware of that.
Well, it's Mother Nature, you know, you gotta plan the days, the wind, it may not cooperate, so that's out of our control.
Yeah, again, we're not engineers,
Right.
we would, obviously, I think we would all like to see something that doesn't run a 6-month period.
I just don't wanna say 6 months and offend somebody, but the intention is there, that's,
I think right now, this is all hypothetical.
yeah,
Let us get our scope,
okay.
or it's presented, and then we'll have the steering committee meet, and we'll go from there. I think we'll have a better handle on all this before Christmas.
Is there some light on that?
How long it will take to do a noise study depends on how complicated the scope of work is going to be.
Yeah.
How many different wind conditions, how many different directions you're going to want. Because you can't predict the wind.
Correct, yeah.
You can't control it.
Yeah.
And I did also note that in the letter from the DEP to you, Mr. Chairman, it did suggest that the protocol, any protocol that's developed, be run past the DEP for review and comment,
Yeah.
if they're going to be used for potential enforcement action. So I don't know what your plan is.
That could be a
on that.
roadblock too, or a speed bump, I should say, not a roadblock, but a speed bump. You know, we are planning on doing something in a week.
Once the steering committee passes it back to the Board of Health, it's up to you guys to massage whatever you guys.
I appreciate that, thank you, I thank you, because believe me, we want to move forward as quick as we can too, but there's things that are above us that we're held by, so.
And is our intent that, according to, that we do want to send it to them for review?
Yeah.
That is our intent.
I agree, yeah, well, again, it's the protocol that Mr. Bankett said that, and as I reiterated, we don't want to step off that line, there's things we can do, but we'd really drop the ball if we didn't work with the state. Wouldn't be good for anybody, so.
Just curiosity, during the pendency of the steering committee putting the proposals together and then the study itself going forward, if it is in fact 6 months plus, what would the board be interested in obtaining as far as evidence that would secure an intermittent shutdown of the turbine? Because my client is going to get zero relief for this entire period.
Yeah, I'm not sure, I'm looking at this post-construction study, that's where I'm at.
I mean, the
No, I understand.
flicker alone is a clear nuisance, and you've seen the videotape, and that was just a few minutes, but it perpetuates for up to 3 hours. So what are they supposed to do in the interim?
Don't know. We're working to a goal, and that's where I'm at right now.
I mean, you're in a process, you know what the other process is, okay? That's a long one too. So,
Is there a motion on this letter?
are you okay with the letter? I mean, I'm thinking superfluous myself, but
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make any sense to duplicate efforts, but if I get the ball rolling, not that it's not rolling already. And
I don't understand.
Let's put it this way, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter what I think. As a zoning enforcement officer, if I get a request for enforcement, I have to respond in 14 days.
And this is my question, I mean, the Board of Health has taken considerable steps here to get a study done. I don't see what the point of the Board of Health asking the building inspector to do exactly the same thing is. That's my question.
And just on top of that, this is just my personal view, but that letter, which I've just listened to now, seems to fly in the space of the spirit of the creation of the steering committee in the first place.
Yeah,
That's just my own personal view. Others
Well, a
might.
private citizen could just as easily send that letter, and we could have a parallel study being conducted by the building inspector at
I
the
think
same
that's
time.
probably what would happen, but the private citizens came to the Board of Health and you know, I think that would probably be the choice. Because I think that we have, you know, not to get into what all the different remedies are, but I think we probably have a little bit more power than Mr. Duggan does in this circumstance. So,
The only thing I see is in the planning board, that's my only thing, where it asks for the building inspector to trigger that with Scituate Wind LLC. And this would be the formal request from the board to the building department, to work with the building department. Again, a request from us to.
Yeah, I don't think any harm will be done by it.
Yeah.
It's superfluous, but it's good to let.
well, my concern was that it's really directing you to do something and then you have to run a clock.
Yeah.
Whereas right now, what we're doing is we've got a process that's going on. You've been notified of it, obviously, and you can participate and comment to the extent that you think that we're going off the track. And I'm sure Mr. Banger would tell us the same thing if he thought we were making a mistake. And that's all, to me, that's all I think we really need to do, rather than asking you to start a formal process.
I think what the point he brought up though is that this reinforces the financial liability by the recipient of the permit.
Yeah, and you know, I've heard Scituate Wind is being cooperative right now and willing to step up to the plate and finance this study. If that changes, then maybe this is a run that we can go.
Well, that's, you know, I mean, and this letter will make sure that that won't change.
And it saves a step.
And I'm not saying Mr. Dean is disingenuous in his offer, but this is more of a paper trail that establishes that based on Section 10 of that permit, they are liable for a noise study. That's
There's a
You have
motion.
a comment from the audience.
So I was going to suggest that, you know, maybe you don't send the letter now, and once you have the steering committee plan, everything's ready to go, then you can notify to get the funding.
Yeah, I think it's premature.
I agree.
Good point. You can keep the letter.
Okay, if there's no motion, then we'll keep the letter in the file.
In the
Okay.
back pocket, I guess, and we'll see what develops when parties gotta come together.
Any other matters that you need to cover tonight? Everybody's good?
We're good with that then. We'll adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Well, I think
You
We got other stuff.
email issues.
We do?
Yeah, one other thing, but we'll say the Scituate wind turbine discussion is
Anything else?
continue.
You should do all your meetings here, it's nice. Do all your meetings here, it's nice. Maybe early afternoon.
Where do you see the new town hall?
Thank you for everybody showing up and especially members that work for the town of Scituate. Do appreciate you coming and helping out. Everything. And,
Sorry, I didn't see page 2.
We'll hang around, we'll watch.
What's gonna be the best time for, you know, to meet, you know, we want, the books, where do we post the notices? posted, just like we do our own meetings on the bulletin board at the town hall. What kind of notice our members of the committee want to?
Website, so many days in advance.
Well, it seemed like our first problem was logistics of busy people. And we're gonna have holidays, we're gonna have, who knows what we're gonna have? And then we have one of the members coming from
If
the
you want to
shore.
back, you want to. Sure.
And I don't wanna get, it seems like we get bogged down in logistics and when you have a proposal, well, like my initial email was, we swap emails and then try to work it out there and then meet in person. I want to, I don't want to be the lead. I want to be the somewhat the mediator as opposed to the.
So here's sort of my undertaking on this. Let's see how. So my suggestion is, I have to follow up with the company that we're speaking with on Friday.
Right.
To make sure that they can meet the deadline for next week. I think,
They attend.
If the steering members or the other members of the steering committee would allow, I would think it would probably be appropriate for them to be in attendance to speak to the content of the report, just given the fact that Mr. Kelly and I are not experts in this particular area. And I would certainly be more than happy to be in agreement with the company that put forward the proposal that Mr. Deems kind of circulates to speak to that as well. If that's assuming they look different. If they look the same, then I don't think we really need to go through that exercise necessarily. I think in fairness to everybody on the committee that aren't experts in this field, they probably need a few days to review both of these once they're in. But I would certainly think 5 business days from after the scope circulated. And I'm not quite sure what the legal requirements of the steering committee are under the open meeting laws in terms of notice and that sort of, I'd have to rely on.
I think you guys are gonna need to be careful, and you're gonna need to communicate through Jennifer, which is what we do.
Okay, that's a good idea.
My concern is, we will know next week whether we have our scope. We then are going to have to do the notice. We're running right into Christmas at that point in time, and that's just right into people. Oh, it's only 2?
Yeah.
So it's sometime the week of the 16th that we should endeavor to meet.
Yeah.
And I propose that we try to do it the night of the 18th. And if that doesn't work for the people from the North Shore, we can always do it by video conference or teleconference.
Well, what I've read on the open meeting, you can't do it.
Oh, boy.
I've read through some of this open meeting stuff 10 times over the last week, over this past week. I don't believe you can, well, you certainly can't vote a board member can't vote teleconferencing. They have to be physically present, right?
But this is not it's not the Board of Health. So I think maybe we're gonna have to go back to the AG's office, but I do recall reading that there is a way for teleconference participation going on. But again, you guys
But
want
during
to
an
go
open meeting.
Yeah, during the meeting,
During a
right?
meeting.
Yeah,
Is that what you meant?
yes.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, I thought you meant,
No,
outside of the.
no,
During the meeting. Yeah.
no, that you'd have it in public forum with the speakerphone right there.
Do you have anything to sort of add? I'm really just trying to, so we're all on the same page in terms of the logistics. Long before we get into specifics of scope and whatnot, the logistics are the foremost. We got to get everybody communicating and together.
I'm not familiar with what's required under the open meeting law, so I can't speak to that. I mean, does this mean that Mr. Thompson gets the proposal from the consultant, he's not allowed to send it out to us, he's got to send it to Jennifer, Jennifer send it out to us, is that what the?
I think he-
Well, you also need, do we need minutes?
And what if Jennifer's not around?
No, I think you can send it to people. It's that you cannot have a deliberative process. So you can't call them up, the other people up and say, let's talk about this issue. No deliberations. Okay, that's all got to take place.
So upon receipt of this proposal, I would be within my right, our rights as a committee, not to put anybody in any difficulty, to circulate that.
Yes.
And then for everybody's individual review, and then it will be discussed when we special open meeting. And I think Mr. Kelly suggested that would be the 18th of December. Which I think is fair.
We've got a question.
And can we, if
Hold on one second.
you can make it, if you can't make it, Mr. Kelly can.
We'll have two
You can
representatives,
have an alternate.
so we can have an alternate if I'm. Or
And can we meet with only one of, I mean, can people be missing from that meeting?
I would think that each group has 2 seats allocated, so they couldn't have more, but if they choose to have less, I personally don't think that the committee would agree. I think the important
I've got to
thing,
ask the questions
yeah,
in
I think
open setting.
the important thing is if
and-
there's 6 members there, there's gotta be quorum.
I think we said two members, one vote.
Yes, that's correct, yes, that's
As a
right.
matter of fact, I think you were agnostic as a member of members, you just wanted to make sure that we understood was the right vote.
Correct.
Exactly.
I was just going to comment, Alan Greenberg, at 122 Old Oaken Bucket Road. I heard the question about whether there have to be minutes. Open meeting law does require minutes.
I would think so.
Do you need to appoint a secretary?
You sure you can't go back to the AG's office for a second opinion?
Geez, steering committee get complicated.
No, they,
That was just
you know,
good,
well,
honest
it's
citizens
funny,
get
you
together,
know,
put something together.
after I got the response, then I had a few more questions, I tried to call them back and couldn't get through. I mean, it's not the easiest.
So,
You know, you can leave messages and get this, it's not like a direct line.
just on the matter of the secretary, could we impose upon you just to get some clarity on that? Whether this secretary would be required to record the minutes at that meeting? I'm assuming that's the case, but.
If you just tape it, it's fine. Recording.
Just as a matter of information, I think you might have a lot better luck, like if you went to town council, he'll give you a whole list of guidelines for the open meeting.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to communicate with him than it will be just Jones on it.
Mr. Toomey is well versed
Yeah.
in the other meeting law.
Good.
I don't have anything else.
You don't even, just check with town administrator or myself, and you call him and he'll sit down with you, whatever it takes. That's the easiest way to do it, believe me, rather go to this thing.
Cool. We're good.
Thank you.
You know,
No, we still have a little business.
yes.
Okay, so that's, we're just here, we're just.
Well, just on the,
But you're done with us, right?
done with the,
Yeah, unless you want to hear about, what we're doing to, study law.
Be my friend.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a nice
Thank you.
holiday.
Yeah,
Thank you.
See you next year.
Good way of looking at it, yeah.
Thanks, Pete.
Very nice. Here, take this. Yeah. No, this is.
So, next, I don't know if this was.
Yes. One else about that.
Nice to see you again.
See you, feel like. Oh, okay, that's right.
Dave's not bad.
I mean, yeah.
I think they boiled it down to time.
Easy for me to get.
Yes, yeah. Likewise.
These guys, she's just driving around here.
What's our next step?
One for Mario?
Oh, what happened to them?
Page 16, well, number one.
They have 30 days to appeal.
Yeah. I can't wait for it.
And they would appeal to the state.
No, it's not even.
That was decided by the state. And they appealed to, they would appeal to.
Yeah, you can if you want to.
Hey, Mary,
We'll do that.
Yeah, we'll do that, but
we'll help you, but we're still meeting.
we're still meeting, we're still in meeting.
Oh, I thought we,
No,
am I supposed to be?
No, we got it, thanks.
We were just discussing the old business.
Oh, the decision.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
What would be
I don't blame you for wanting to get out here.
what would be a general timeframe when it would be like
30 days.
Oh, no, but,
Oh, how, if it is appealed, then how long would it take?
yeah.
A year. 9 months.
And they would either uphold,
The appeals court?
and at that point, they're really not talking about merits, they're talking about the process.
Well, they tend to.
Mostly. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say what you're saying. They would look to see whether the judge's decision was clearly erroneous. And he
I'm not
basically is.
See you later.
So, I mean, it's very unlikely that.
Mike, that's what to do, talk to town council.
Okay.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah,
He's very good at that.
he's good at it, he'll give you a whole open meeting guidelines and all that.
He helped me out on the conflict question.
Because you'll never get to the attorney general, you know, just,
No, at this point, I feel comfortable that I got the answer I wanted,
Yeah.
or is comfortable with, that we then canceled this afternoon's meeting.
it was questionable.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a gray area. Always safe than sorry, man.
See you later.
Thank you.
Good night, good night, good night.
Okay, so it does not get appealed?
So if it doesn't get appealed, then, you know, the question we really have is when do we want to order them off? And I think, you know, from a practical perspective, we should probably get an update as to when.
You mean off the well and put them back into a public water supply?
No, but our original mandate, or our original order was to disconnect in 60 days. Give us notification from the water department that you have now reconnected. And actually, did we need something from a plumber, or we just wanted something from the? Yeah.
There was.
I mean, I don't think I'd want to delay on instigating, on initiating that.
I think the inquiry by Jennifer of counsel for as to, you know, what their intentions are, and are they going to comply with the order, which has been upheld. You know, and then she can report back to us and recommend any action. It's really, at this point, it's just an enforcement question, which is really more on her than us to decide what to do. If there is a violation, then it comes to us. We can probably go into the judge and get a order from the judge.
Well, we can force her to enforce. No.
Yeah, that's what I mean. But if they don't, you gotta get an order from the judge, from a judge.
No, but if the health agent does not enforce it, we can request that they enforce it.
Oh, yeah.
It's not, it's more our decision than the director. Than the director's. No, I'm just, I'm just curious the chronological timeline here. All right, no, I think we're good. We did this, and I think that was a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, good decision. Anything else?
Next meeting is Wednesday, December 19th.
It is.
Was that Wednesday, was that on the schedule from a year ago? It was? Okay. I'm just not,
There it is. Oops. It was there, on my head.
there you go.
I think actually our original meeting too had been on the 5th for this week.
And we'll,
I had it on the calendar for that, so the next meeting is the 19th.
and
I'm not sure why it wasn't.
I would have normally, we should have known that on the 5th. I thought it was the 10th. That's what I was saying.
and we'll have the turbine as old business on that.
I don't think the turbine's coming up on the next meeting. I don't think there's any reason for it.
And how about if there is a reason for it to come up?
Then you can put it on.
You can put it on.
But we have to put it on the notice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gotta have proper notice, but I think the only thing as chairman that I want to,
17th.
the only thing as chairman that I want to see is something from the steering committee. I think at this point, Yeah.
Well, how about, and more, I'm thinking, an update from the Board of Health liaison to the steering committee.
I think that's being done under old business.
Well, I guess that was my initial
Old
question.
business, just report from Mike Gossett.
But don't you need to spell that out? on
Yes,
old
you do.
business?
Yeah,
Okay.
old business.
All right, so I
Especially
just,
with the new open meeting law, you should spell it out,
well,
yeah.
and we may not even, I could say no update.
Right, that's fine. All right,
So
so
we
we'll
just
put
wanna
that
make
on
sure.
the agenda.
Okay.
And that could be our only agenda item. I mean, do you know of anything, do you sense that there's anything,
We haven't had any kind of buzz, so
Yeah.
we'll see.
you get a sense that there has been
I
anything?
don't think she's approved anything that
Well, the only,
requires
yeah,
a meeting.
the only other things that fell off our radar, I think, are the all relations, and we also had some stuff with fluoride that's come in. But I think Jennifer said that person that made a complaint is still gathering information, so she,
Right. Mhm.
we expressed to her it's a concern of ours, but we're dealing with the wind turbine, and she said, no, I think this is what I interpret, that we're still getting information, so it wasn't a big deal. I just didn't want to bite off more than we wanted to chew. That's a couple of big topics, so.
Yeah, and that woman, she did meet with her, she came up about the fluoride.
Yeah,
So that,
yeah, they've been
I would
communicating.
assume
Yeah.
she would get back to Jennifer if she was waiting for action.
And
Yeah, so I'm not gonna, we'll let that ride.
And how long ago was that? We talking like 3 months ago or within the past, month?
It might have been like 6 weeks ago or
Oh,
something.
okay.
I don't remember the exact date.
Yeah, the well regulations are the one that we kind of put that on the back burner because of the turbine, so. I don't see the turbine going away for another month or two anyway, so. All right, so we're good for the 19th. If, I'll leave it up. I mean, we don't have to put it on the agenda now. If you see something come up, we just gotta put it on the agenda, 2 days before the meeting? So,
So they can get published.
yeah, so we can just leave it open for now, I think.
And on our notices, I can tell you date and time. We try to secure the meeting room.
Mm-hmm.
How often, does that meeting room get booked up? Is it tough to get?
I don't see a lot going on during the day. There's sporadic meetings, because I'm assuming you'd want to meet during the day, right?
Well,
Or would you want it at night?
Well, back to the logistics question, I mean, if you'd seen, is Jennifer available after a 9 to 5 hours?
If you ask her,
Oh, yeah.
Is she available weekends?
I wouldn't want to ask her that.
Well, and
But I would, if you really need to.
and maybe other people aren't either, I guess,
Yeah.
I mean, just.
Jennifer's pretty dedicated.
No,
reasonable,
but you even know, when you're meeting with your fellow lawyers, to get 6 of you, usually you guys probably have an electronic calendar, and the computer figures out when, if you punch in the 6 that need to meet,
That's
does it
about
tell?
half my life scheduling with lawyers, yes.
But the efficient way is, it has control of your calendar, and you say, these are the people I want to meet, and it coordinates what block is available, right? That doesn't work?
That program has its flaws.
Okay.
As soon as everybody uses the same program, most of it. But it's
These
usually.
6 people aren't connected in even any remote fashion of that, and I guess, I'm just back to, I hope we can find them. I was just asking, I will ask Jennifer.
Yeah.
No, I think it should be during the day, and we can get the room, I'll let you know, and then you just, there's a meeting, and we post it right on our
I would guess it
Court
would be
board,
hard, I mean, it would be hard for me to meet during the day. I don't know where with Mr. Thompson or Mr. Kelly work, but it is in Boston, I'm not saying they won't do it, but you might need to have an evening meeting too.
And is that, is that a problem to get the room at night? Then you went into ZBA, you went into conservation.
You can always use,
Yeah,
Okay.
and then I think there's
Yeah, but you guys can,
there's other
you can
meeting
get Dunkin'
space
Donuts
too.
if you wanted to, you know what I mean?
well, it's gotta be public, enough so that the public, if they can come, will be.
I keep forgetting. I
Were you here the first half hour of this meeting?
No, but the whole steering committee thing, I don't get that whole open meeting, because it's just a group of good citizens that are trying to bring information to the board.
The law is put in place to,
Is it-
it has good intentions.
Right.
Unfortunately, this
Yeah.
steering committee, it's gonna hamper the logistics of it. But you have to adhere to the law, that's all there is to it.
I think you can like book the library,
Right.
that GAR hall.
Yeah,
or
well, here.
Okay, all right, no, we'll,
So there's other options too. I mean, obviously the town hall is probably the most convenient.
and you guys don't wanna be CC'd on any of those emails?
I don't think we can, or should be.
Okay, so it should just be the 6 people?
Yeah,
All right.
yeah. And, save them, obviously, we may want to look at them for a process, later on, but rather than having to go through it all, we just read the history, it may help. But you're gonna need to, Jennifer, all of those emails are public records too, so don't throw them away.
And I have to hand you those an email during our meeting.
You don't have to, but you may want to.
Because they are public, and make them a public record, or are they a
No, they
public
are
record
public
to
records.
begin with?
They are. If the subcommittee is subject to the open meeting law, which you've determined that it has,
Yeah.
then I think the communications of the committee are also public communications, need to be preserved. Jennifer should have them all, if everybody's doing it the way I suggested, which is to do everything through Jennifer. That's the way, that's your default, is that all of the communications are kept by Jennifer.
Do you mean that everybody individually communicates with her, or
Yes.
it is a group of 6? It's a group email?
No.
You mean specifically send it to
She
Jennifer?
can send an email out to people announcing, here's stuff, here's when the meeting's gonna be. You can do the same, but there shouldn't be any email saying, what do you think of this? Maybe we should do this. Gee, I don't like that study, let's not conclude that. That's all gotta be done at the meeting. The deliberative process
Okay.
has gotta be public at the meeting.
No, I'm,
Now, you and Jennifer, you can share your thoughts with Jennifer, okay? Nothing wrong with that. Or another individual, now I'm thinking, now this is a committee, yeah, so you two are the same voting block. So I think the two of you can communicate outside of the process. But she's a town employee, so you're gonna have to keep public all of those communications that you have.
and can Third Cliff and Scituate Wind, when they come up with their scope, they send it to Jennifer. Jennifer then can send it to Scituate Wind. If Scituate Wind
No,
wants...
I think they can send it to everybody. You just can't solicit comment about it.
Right, you can't discuss it.
Okay, no, I've heard you.
That's not for discussion.
It really comes down, okay. Here's what I have, at our next meeting, we can discuss.
Yeah, here's the document.
All right,
That's all it is. So that's just a ministerial task.
okay,
Or the next meeting will be at such and such a time.
got it.
Okay, that's okay. All right, move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.